Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners on key business topics and specialist areas. This is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. My host joining me today is BizSmart Select Member and Core Advisor Ian Priest. But before we start our webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Ian, and he will do his best to answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you, Ian. Over to you.
Thank you. For those of you who've heard my webinars in the past, they've always been about finance. So today's is a little bit different, and I want to take a more in-depth look at family businesses. Everybody in a family business says, yeah, but we're a family business. We're different. Every family business is different. But just how different is different? Scratch the surface, and most family businesses actually have the same issues, the same worries, the same concerns. Doesn't matter how big or how small, the concerns and worries are the same. And you say, you know, a family business can be anything from a one-man band to a huge organisation, as the slide says, like Clark Shoes. My good friend Peter Roper, who's spent more years than he wants to admit helping family businesses, breaks down understanding what makes family businesses tick into three fairly easily digested chunks to help you understand the key drivers in a family business. Filling the fridge, that's providing for their family, their employees and their families, generates intense loyalty. They want to sleep at night. Family businesses generally want to deal with people like themselves, motivated by doing the right thing and not ripping people off. The big banks could take a lesson or three from this. And finally, they like to do business with people they know, like and trust. And let's face it, life's just too short to deal with scumbags. If you're in a family business, I'm sure you'll agree with these principles. And if you want to deal with family businesses, then you ignore them at your peril. Where I want to concentrate today, however, is not so much on dealing with family businesses, but rather with the tensions and pressures inside family businesses. If we use a simple Venn diagram, and I hope you can see the different coloured circles there, they're perhaps not as bright as they looked on my screen when I was putting it together. It's fairly to illustrate these tensions and the issues they throw up. Most commentators on family businesses only concentrate on the intersections of the circles. So if we follow the numbers round, number one, family members who work in the business. Number two, the owners of the business who are not family members. Number three, the owners of the business who are family members but don't work in the business. And number four, potentially the loneliest of the lot, particularly if it's one individual, is the owner that works in the family business. Running any business can be a lonely place, even more so in a family business where you may not want to or feel able to confide in your spouse, your parents, your kids on the issues and problems. Everything sits on your shoulders and it's very easy to be crushed by it. If you think you're in this situation, then BizSmart's smart boards can be a great way to shift this burden in a completely confidential and non-judgmental way. Again, you can find details of smart boards on the BizSmart website. So let's start breaking down some of these relationships, starting with the family in the business. This can be an enormous area of stress and tension. You may have family members who have expectation of being in the family business. Siblings, cousins, nephews and nieces could all be growing up with an expectation of a cushy berth in the family cruise liner. In the business itself, you may see really bitter resentment from long-standing employees when Cousin Johnny is given a job even though he's a complete numpty, especially if Cousin Johnny is put into a position of authority. You have to have a clear policy and manage expectations from an early stage. It's no good thinking that by the time they're old enough they'll have lost interest. This is a people management task at its worst. You need to take a look at some of the webinars on managing people, such as the 5 behaviours of a cohesive team that was broadcast on the 1st of November and again is available through the BizSmart website. I recently dealt with a family business that was started by grandfather. Father was now past retirement age but wouldn't get out of the way. And the eldest son was very dynamic and had great ideas but was unable to get out from under Dad's shadow. Mom and Dad and their 3 children were all directors, even though Mom never set foot in place, and the younger siblings were effectively the accounts clerk and the forklift driver, while the oldest son was working 16 hours a day trying to run the business. However, Dad insisted that they were all paid the same and got exactly the same rewards. The eldest son's wife also worked in the business in a management position but with no real authority. A recipe for civil war if ever there was one. Let's move on to the owners. Even if all the owners work in a business, there can be conflicts and issues. For example, I know a large transport business that passed from father to his 2 sons. The sons' wives hated each other, so the sons rarely spoke even at work. Makes running a business very difficult. I once met one of the Thorntons of the toffee fame. He was the production, or he had been the production director, but he would only find out they were opening a new shop when he saw it in the trade press, because his cousin, who was responsible for shop openings, didn't speak to him. These tensions can be because of business issues, such as one or more parties wanting to exit and others not, or they may be down to some family quarrel or imagined slight. We all know what families can be like. In many ways, it can be worse when there are owners outside the business. They will want to have a say in what's going on, and particularly on dividend policy and remuneration for the employed owners, which could have serious impacts on the cash within the business. You need to head all these issues off as far as you possibly can. Plan the divorce if you like before the wedding. Get a decent shareholders agreement drawn up by an experienced lawyer, one that sets out how things will be handled, the basis of valuation, etc. It's so much easier to agree these matters while you are still friends. If you have external owners, consider a family charter that sets out how the family will interact with the company. Who has what powers, who shares can be transferred to, and what permissions are needed to transfer shares. If your business is of a reasonable size, consider having a proper board structure with non-executive directors to represent the interests of family members, but keep it business. Family and the owners. This is perhaps one of the most contentious areas. Ownership and the family dilution of shareholdings across generations and down family lines can cause all sorts of issues. A large and very well-known family business in Worcestershire has recently undergone a major upheaval, which has resulted in the MD, grandson, being sacked and taking his own company to a tribunal for unfair dismissal. He was a 1/3 shareholder and was running the business a bit like a personal fiefdom. His 2 sisters ultimately got fed up and voted him off the board because they had 1/3 of the shares each as well. And then they sacked him for gross misconduct. Imagine for a minute a family business started by George, who has 4 children. Each of them marries. One dies and leaves his 25% to his wife. One has 4 children, so they end up with 6.25% each. Another has 5 children, so they end up with 5% each. And the fourth has 1 son from his first marriage and 3 from his second, but he's also promised to look after his new wife's existing 2 children. Who's the major shareholder now? Well, the son who died childless left his shares to his wife, and she in turn has left them to her younger brother. So he's now got 25% of someone else's family business. And unless they all act together, which is extremely unlikely, he's got the biggest say. Don't leave these things to chance. If you have a business that will pass down the generations, make a will, set up a trust, or make your wishes clear. I recently had to help out a family business. Father and eldest son had worked all their lives building up 4 companies. Unfortunately, father now had dementia and son was running the businesses. Father had divorced and remarried, and there were 3 step-siblings who also worked in the business. Son, you would say quite reasonably, expected to inherit the business, and that his sisters would be looked after from the rest of Dad's estate. After all, he'd built the business up. Unfortunately, they only had a copy of Dad's old will, and it was not very well drawn. It implied son was to get the bulk of Dad's shares to give him control, but it was not explicit and was open to interpretation. In particular, the companies were not particularly properly identified, as the will contained shortened company names and no company numbers. Again, a space for challenge. There was known to be a later will which was a bit better drafted, but not much, but they could only find an unsigned photocopy of the newer one, and no one had any idea where the original was. As I said, Dad has dementia, so there's no prospect of redoing the will and getting it right. All these examples have multiple winners and losers. Unfortunately, the winners will always be the lawyers, as whole inheritances can be blown away in legal challenge. Everyone else is a loser. What happens when a shareholder dies? In English law has a strange way of making death even more complicated. For example, if you're a company director and shareholder and you and your partner are killed together in, say, a car accident, the law determines that the youngest was the last to die. So if you don't have a will that states to the contrary, your holding in the family business could end up in one or more of your partner's family's hands. The impacts inside a business can be potentially much greater. Take this example. There are 3 siblings who own 33% of the business each. On the 1st of November, one of the siblings has a heart attack and dies aged just 54. What happens now? Well, his 18-year-old partner now owns 1/3 of the business. Do the other directors want him or her as an equal partner? The spouse could demand that the business be sold or broken up to crystallise the value of the shares. Now let's say it's a trading business that would be valued at 5 times its earnings, which on the example given comes out at £1.75 million. So she or he wants a call £583,000. Where are they going to get that from? As you can see from the balance sheet, if they break up the business and sell all the assets, they'd just about raise half of what was owed, because the valuation is based on the business as it was trading at the date of death. That would leave nothing for the other directors. Again, get advice. Don't leave it to chance. Get a good shareholder agreement in place. Take out some life cover written in trust so the cash is there to buy out the deceased interests. BizSmart Select members can help you resolve all these issues. Review the webinars catalogue, contact core advisors or select members or your existing advisors, but don't leave it to chance. Don't put it off till tomorrow. You don't know what's around the corner. So some very scary thoughts on the issues and tensions within family businesses. We've only scratched the surface in this short webinar, but you're not alone. BizSmart has the contacts and the resources and the people to help you deal with these issues. Make use of the website and the webinar catalogue. Call one of our call advisors or our select members to help you get specialist advice. That's all from me. I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ian. Your first question has come through from Simon, and he asks, what are the most important things to consider in succession planning?
Having a plan is the most important thing. I can't tell you what is going to be the most important thing for your business, because to that extent all family businesses are different, because all the personal relationships are different. But have a plan, have it agreed in advance, and get it down on paper so that everybody knows where they are. If necessary, if the succession plan involves people having to be developed to be able to step into your shoes, make sure there's a training plan in place to help them get there. Don't just expect them to be able to pick up the pieces and run with it. Make sure that people can cope and they know what to do and that they can find the information. But please, 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 whatever you do, have a plan, have a family agreement in place so that everybody knows what's happening and you don't get an almighty fallout at the wake.
Thank you. Another question, this one's from Sarah, and she asks, if I die unexpectedly, can the family continue to run the business?
That's a good question. Can they continue to run the family business? In law, there's no reason why they shouldn't, but have they got the skills, the knowledge? You need to make sure that if that's what you want, that A, you're explicit that that's what you want, B, that they want to run it and that they've got the skills and knowledge to do it. Again, BizSmart Advisory can help you put a training plan in place to get that, to help you develop those people through. I'm working with a company at the moment where the shareholders are both in their 70s, the next generation's in his early 20s. He's just joined a smart board to help him develop those skills to take over.
Brilliant. Kevin has sent a question, and he asks, how can a family business deal with the offspring not necessarily being the right person to run the business moving forward?
That's a very, very difficult one, and the brutal answer is if they're not the right person to run the business for going forward, deal with it. Tell them they're not the right person. Tell them why, or help them develop so that they can. But don't put a square peg into a round hole. It doesn't work. Don't try and force people into running a business that they might not want to run. It causes misery. My grandparents had a shop. It was a bit like Arkwright's open all hours. You could never have a holiday. If they wanted to go away, we had to go and move in to run the shop while they were away. You could guarantee while you were having your Christmas dinner, somebody come and bang on the back door because they'd run out of something. Could never get away from it. But Nan had run the shop forever, and her mum had run the shop before that. And then one day, Nan sat down with my mum and said, I'm sorry, I'm closing the shop. I know you expect to take over and run it, but I've had enough. And Mum said, I don't bloody want it. I've never wanted it. My Nan had been running that shop for years because she thought my mum wanted to run it. She hated it. It's not worth it.
Okay, you've got another question from Laura. I've always seen my business as my pension. Are there any steps I need to take to maximise this?
Absolutely, there are a lot of steps you need to take if you expect your business to be your pension. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, can I take 3 months off and leave the business to run and it will still be there when I come back? And if the answer to that is no, you haven't got a business that's going to provide you a pension because you haven't got a business you can sell. For a business to be sold or saleable, it's got to be able to operate without you. It's got to have the next layer of people down that can run the business perfectly well without you being there, so that you can disappear from the equation and somebody else can come in and pick up the reins. So you do need to spend probably a number of years getting the business into a shape with processes laid down and documented, with people with the right skills and training and knowledge, so that you as the owner are not key to that business. Because while you remain key to the business, you haven't got anything you can sell. So if you're the one who's got all the key relationships, start handing them over to other people. You've got to trust people to keep those. Keep a watching brief, but you've got to be able to step back. As I said, the key test is, could you take 3 months out and the business would still survive and thrive without you? If the answer is no, you've got a lot of work to do. Again, BizSmart advisors can help.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I think that those are all your questions. Thank you again, Ian, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of the presentation and Ian's contact details out to you all very shortly. So if you do have any further questions, then please email Ian direct. Before we close, just a quick reminder, this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. And if you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website, biz-smart.co.uk, and go to the Smart Room page. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining us.